Hi, and welcome. My name is Lindsay Barton, and I am a program manager at Junior Achievement. Junior Achievement is a nonprofit organization that inspires and prepares young people to succeed in the global economy. And we do that by teaching students about financial literacy, work and career readiness, and entrepreneurship. Today I'm here to talk to you about a program called JA It's My Job. JA It's My Job teaches you about key interpersonal skills necessary to get started in the workplace, from introducing yourself to coworkers, acting and speaking in a professional way, and active listening. I will be discussing applications and resumes. There's going to be a variety of activities in this lesson, so let's get started. Finding a job generally requires you to have a written representation of yourself. When you search for a job, you need to tell employers about yourself. You may have to fill out an application online or on paper. Employers may want you to upload your resume to a website or hand it to them in person. Regardless of the format, you'll need to present yourself in writing to get a job. If you're trying to get a job, some of the most important things you want the employer to know about yourself may include that you're punctual, you're a hard worker, and you have a good attitude. When applying for a job, you want to present yourself as the ideal candidate. In this session, you will begin to describe yourself in ways that make you appealing to employers. As you work on the activities in this lesson, keep in mind that what you're writing will represent you to a potential employer. If you want to get an interview, it will all come down to what you write on paper. Let's get started with our first activity, job application. Please take out your handout labeled job application. Now, I'm sure you've probably been asked what you want to be when you grow up. You've been thinking about how you want to earn a living, but have you given much thought to the process of getting hired? Before you have a job, you have to get a job. It takes work to get work. Many companies require prospective employees to fill out an employment application. Filling out a job application is similar to applying for college, or maybe a student loan or internship, or anything else you may want to be considered for. A job application is the first step to getting a job that you want. So you'll want to fill it in as completely as possible. Some application forms are printed and some are online. Some ask only for straightforward facts like your address and birth date, while others ask about personal and professional experience. When I was in high school, many of the job applications that I filled out were about 2 to 4 pages in length. Anytime I filled out an application, I had another person read it over to make sure everything was spelled correctly and that everything was filled in completely. So now we're going to move on to our activity. So we're going to identify the items that might be hard for you to answer because maybe you don't have the information right at your fingertips, such as contact information for a prior employer, or a personal or professional reference. Give yourself plenty of time to gather this information so that you can turn in your job application by the due date. So now take a look at the job application handout and think of some examples of the things you might include under the items additional education, certificates and licenses, awards, and special skills. In a moment, I'll give you about 2 to 3 minutes to think of those examples and write those down, and then we'll come back and discuss. Think of things that would be important for an employer to know. Ready? Go. Thank you so much for completing the activity. Now let me run through just some other possible answers that you can consider when you complete your next job application. Keep in mind classes you have taken outside of school, like a workshop or a training program, or you're part of a group like Toastmasters. Think about the trainings or classes in things like automotive repair, graphic design, or another technical skill. Also include any first aid training you received, or if you're CPR certified. A potential employer might even want to know if you received perfect attendance at school. Sharing this information could help a potential employer recognize that you are reliable. Some of you may have never had a job before, and you're asking, what should I say in the previous employer section? Well, I've got you covered. You could share experience like maybe you worked for neighbors or you have experience babysitting. If not, then just be honest about not having previous experience and be prepared to answer interview questions about anything you write on your job application. Earlier, we talked about personal and professional references and why you should give yourself plenty of time to find this information to include on your job application. We're going to talk in a little bit about why this task is so time-consuming, but first, what are personal and professional references? A professional reference is a recommendation from someone you have worked with that can vouch for your qualifications. A personal reference or character reference is a recommendation from someone who can vouch for your character, especially in ways that show that you are dependable. You'll need to think about who would be willing to be a reference, such as a former or current employer, a friend of the family, a teacher, or a coach. References should not be people you are related to. So start talking to potential references before you list them, and this is why it can be time-consuming. Ask them if they will be your reference and get their contact information. Think about who might be willing to vouch for you. Now that you understand the kinds of information employers will seek from an applicant, practice filling out the form. It will help you prepare for when you need to fill out your next job application. Let's move on to our next activity called crafting a resume. For this activity, you will need two handouts, one labeled resume template and the other sample resume. Throughout your professional lives, you will likely have a resume. A resume is the standard way of presenting yourself to a potential employer. It's a summary of your experience and your accomplishments. Now, I'd like to direct you to the sample resume. And I'd just like to point out that this resume is for a senior in high school who has listed her school anticipated graduation date, any advanced classes she is in, and her GPA. Now it's time for a few resume tips. Resume tip number 1, stick with the basics. On a printed resume, you'll want to use a simple font and white or cream-colored paper, and you'll want to print only on one side of the page. Resume tip number 2, focus on the positive. What accomplishments are you most proud of? Even if you haven't had a paid job, you have skills, knowledge, and achievements that will help employers understand why you should be hired for the job. Resume tip number 3, be specific. Often, your resume will be scanned by software that's looking for specific words. If you have sales experience, for example, put your employer job title and a description that makes it clear you know how to sell to customers. Resume tip number 4, be accurate. Don't guess about when you had a certain job or the name of the award you won 2 years ago. Make sure you get it right, or you could lose an employer's trust. Tip number 5, keep it professional. Don't include your height, weight, religion, or other personal information. Only include activities and hobbies with work relevance, such as being a team captain or on the chess team. And finally, tip number 6, proofread. Nothing turns off an employer as much as carelessness. Look over your resume several times. Look it over for typos or consistency of presentation, and please have a family member or a friend look over it as well. There are different ways of presenting information on a resume, but the approach in the sample resume is simple and easy to read. So let's take a look. The name and contact information is centered and at the top, with key information in bold. Key information like a 3.5 GPA is noted at the top, along with accomplishments. If your GPA is 3.5 or above, it is definitely worth noting on a resume. Work experience can be both paid and volunteer. When listing your work experience, list it from most recent to oldest and include start and end dates. If the job is current, it should include the start date, then the word present in place of the end date. Remember to note additional information under key skills and activities. You should only include things that are relevant to the kind of job you are applying for. Don't just list any hobby or activity. Make sure it helps paint a picture for you as a great potential employee. Then think about your skill sets in the following categories: basic skills, STEM skills, and technical skills. Basic skills could include things such as teamwork, communication, time management, or leadership. STEM skills could be problem solving, computer literacy, electronics, or coding. And technical skills could be things like writing or research. Technical skills are those used in a profession. For example, a graphic designer's technical skills relate to fonts, creating graphics, or planning for printing. Now let's practice. Imagine you are applying for a job at a company that bakes cookies and delivers them fresh to local stores. The skills and experience you could feature on your resume include baking, time management, delivery, or attention to detail. Now imagine you are applying for a job at a computer store. The skills and experience you could feature on your resume could relate to computer skills and knowledge, experience in retail, or customer service. It is important to tailor your resume to a particular type of job, so you may have more than one resume. Right now, you may be thinking, it's going to be difficult just to craft one resume, let alone having multiple versions for different types of jobs. But you're going to be okay. As you grow in skills and experience, you may find it makes sense to emphasize certain areas. Now let's take a look at the resume template. Shortly, you're going to complete this exercise by answering all of the questions. And I encourage you to do so by referring to your brag sheet if you completed the lesson called Interviewing for a Job, or if you have a personal profile, please use that as well. Now take the next 5 to 10 minutes to complete the activity. Thank you so much for completing the resume template activity. Now I encourage you to keep working on your resume and share it with many friends and family. Remember that this is a basic resume format and that a strong resume takes time to craft, and this is an introduction only. Most often, you will share your resume online or via email, so it's important to be prepared and create multiple versions of your resume. Whatever the format, it will probably be one of many resumes being reviewed. So make it easy to read, well organized, and filled with the most relevant and important information that will get you the job. Remember, to have a job, you need to apply for a job. The way you present yourself in writing can make a huge difference in getting you in the door. Make sure to be specific, accurate, and professional in everything you put on your job application and resume that represents you. That concludes our lesson for applications and resumes. Thank you for joining me.